You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cricket Podcast, where just a couple of days after England suffered the most humiliating defeat of the World Cup, South Africa have asked them to hold their beer. The Netherlands have pulled off an upset for the ages. We've got a few thoughts on Sri Lanka v Australia and maybe a quick look forward to New Zealand, Afghanistan and India v Bangladesh. I'm Jack Hope, and I'm joined by Daniel Norcross, live from India. How are you, Dan? Are you enjoying your trip, first of all?
How could you not enjoy a trip to India? I mean, it's been fantastic. I started in Ahmedabad, which is a dry state, and I thought I got the cheat code. I bought a bottle of whiskey at the airport in duty-free, thinking, oh, that's good. But I accidentally sauntered through hotel security with it in a bag. So that was confiscated from me, and I didn't get to drink it for 5 days. So that's not a cheat code. If you're going to Ahmedabad, just a little warning, buy the whiskey, put it in your luggage before you go into your hotel at 4 o'clock in the morning, bleary-eyed, feeling a bit strange. Then I moved to Delhi, which is a bustling city where a lot happens. I've been to the British High Commission. I've been to a club called Lord of the Drinks, which is the most beautifully named place, and it genuinely is a Lord of the Drinks. I got, stand by me saying so, moderately hammered with Jonathan Trott 2 days. I mean, he wasn't. He was, of course, very sober because he was coaching Afghanistan. And we saw him a couple of days before that match. And he was bullish in his own way, but at the same time humble about Afghanistan's chances of pulling off what he acknowledged would be something of an upset. And after that, I imagine he's cock-a-hoop. I've been to Hyderabad, where I saw the marvellous lake in the middle of Hyderabad, which has got a superb promenade and a 50-foot giant gold statue. Thoroughly enjoyed that. And watched a couple of games of cricket there, including New Zealand being remorseless and Pakistan being not so remorseless. And then went back to Delhi to watch another game of cricket. And now I'm in Chennai because we've got a huge game tomorrow. It's genuinely massive. It's New Zealand against Afghanistan. And look, I mean, the way this World Cup has suddenly gone, if you had, notwithstanding the first match, bet on the next 11 matches for the favourites to win, and you started with a tenner, you'd probably have made a tidy, 2,500% profit. Since then, everything's gone tits up. And that's what we want in a World Cup. It's great, it's magnificent, and it's marvellous. And I've watched today's game mostly from the bar in the hotel I'm staying at in Chennai, whooping with delirious glee as South Africa pulled off the same trick they did at Adelaide at last year's T20 World Cup, where they lost to the Netherlands. I was with Alex Hartley, who said it could never happen. But once again, it was Roelof van der Merwe to the fore. It was a great shame he didn't get David Miller out. That drop catch would have been, had it not been dropped, it would have been a little bit, like, shades of Adelaide, because, of course, it was Roelof that caught David Miller. I thought that was going to be really, really crucial. Turned out not to be crucial because it turns out South Africa aren't as good as everybody thinks they are on the basis of having watched 2 matches of cricket. And that's all it seems to have taken all pundits to have arrived at all of their decisions about. And the next 7 matches might as well not have been played. And instead, it's all happening now. It's brilliant. It's marvellous. It's hot. It's steamy. It's sweaty. And it's India. And I'm in it.
Good. I'm pleased to hear that you're enjoying yourself. I'm just going to run through the cricket quickly, and then we'll get your thoughts on it. Today, the Netherlands, they didn't start that well. They slumped to 112 for 6, which isn't a good score. Fortunately for them, though, Captain Scott Edwards fancied it, and with a couple of cameos from Van der Merwe and Aryan Dutt, they got themselves up to a pretty handy 2-4-5, the Netherlands, in a rain-shortened 43-over match. In response, the South Africans, if you haven't heard, it didn't go that well. Regular wickets, the Netherlands bowling to very good plans, clever plans, restricting them, making things difficult, chipping away, and eventually bowling them out for 207. At one point in their innings with the bookmakers, South Africa were a 95% lock to win the game. Before it did all unravel. Yeah. So
bookies are so thick, aren't they? I mean, that is so extraordinary because any fool who understands anything about cricket could have told you once they got to 245 at Dharamshala in the evening, pull the other one. I mean, that was nearly 6 and over. It takes a wicket or two. It just takes a wicket or two. If you'll pardon the reference to Oliver by Lionel Bart. It was 95%.
95%.
Out of them. How do they make money? How do these people make money?
This wasn't even the bookies. This was the betting market. So it was
I see.
the wisdom of the crowds had come to this conclusion. Wait a
minute, Jack. That changes everything. The wisdom of the crowds. So what you're telling me is that the people who were betting said that. Now I understand because the bookmakers
that isn't how
money
the market
off the people
works.
being stupid enough to do that.
That isn't how the Betfair exchange works, because some people are out there listing the price and saying, well, I actually think that Netherlands are a good price at 5%, and those people are rich now. In this game, some people are the winners. I was imagining actually that when we set this up, we'd have a fairly chilled episode with a couple of games to cover, maybe a bit of a travelog type things. I wanted to ask some questions about your journeys around India and where you're going next, but they've kind of kiboshed everything the Netherlands here, and they were absolutely magnificent today, weren't they? And I like how you're dressed orange and you've got a sepia toned filter, I think, to add to the effect.
No, I'm in India. I'm in India where everything is slightly gold. They do like gold here. And why not? Who doesn't? I mean, it's a very valuable metal. My grandfather went all the way to Australia in search of it, failed to find it, and ended up nearly being killed at Gallipoli. That's what gold can do for you. But that's not what it's done for India, or indeed my hotel room. What it's done for the Netherlands is give them some kind of enormous boost. I mean, this is the biggest upset of the World Cup, except that it was the biggest upset of the last T20 World Cup, which was only a year ago. So is it an upset at all? Are we not at a point where upsets aren't really upsets? And indeed, they shouldn't be upsets, because I think in cricketing terms, we've slightly lost our minds, haven't we? 50-over cricket is a game that's rarely played, certainly rarely played by the number one team that any country wants to put out. You look at England having played 43 games in the last 4 years. How many times would you say in that time that they've put out the team that they thought they'd put out in the World Cup? You look at it and say it would be true of Australia, it'd be true of New Zealand, it'd be true of South Africa, it'd be true of all the major contenders. So when they come into this World Cup, they are essentially unprepared, they're essentially unplanned, and they're playing a format of cricket that they don't play domestically. So it comes as a little bit of a shock to everybody. So it shouldn't come as a great shock to any of us that any of the 10 teams, bearing in mind the West Indies apparently aren't one of the best 10 teams because they failed to qualify, might actually be able to beat anybody. I mean, it's not. Is it a shock? I don't think it's a shock.
I would say it was a shock. South Africa, they've played well in the first two matches, haven't they? And then they were pretty good against Australia in the last three warm-ups they played there. They've got 400 in one of their matches, and 350 against Australia in the other. I know it's only I know 6 and over, and if you lose early wickets and so on, but even at the halfway point in a shortened match, I think it was a massive shock. Some of these Netherlands players aren't full-time cricketers. Like there's that element involved here as well. I think this was off the charts in a way. I mean, I don't think it's as narratively rich as say England v Afghanistan, where you had Afghanistan, the rising men who hadn't been doing that much rising at the World Cup. They'd lost 17 matches in a row. Actually, the quite bad men is the more true story there. And then they play the world champions, and they comprehensively outplay them. I think that has a narrative richness which is attractive to us. But I think in actual cricketing terms, a bunch of sort of South African second teamers, old South African second teamers, some part-time players, some guys who've just sort of finished school, and a couple of other imports turning over the team that people had more or less penciled in for the semi-finals is it's an upset. I think it's great for the sport, and it's obviously great for this format as well. 10 teams. I mean, it would be a bit of a slog if one or two of the teams lost to everybody and then beat the other one. And it's
Look, I don't
really
quite-
good to see that. But I think it's great, but I do think it is a big upset.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure that why people think that they've penciled in South Africa to get through the semi-finals. I'm not quite sure why any team is penciled in to get through the semi-finals, except India and probably New Zealand, for slightly different reasons. India, because they've played 71 matches in the build-up to this World Cup and know exactly what they're doing. They're playing in their own country in very familiar conditions and mostly on pitches that have suited them to a schedule that's suiting them. New Zealand, for slightly different reasons, because New Zealand are just perennial bastards in this respect and know what it is that they have to do to get to where they need to be. But every other country, I don't think really does know how to play 50-over cricket anymore. And the Netherlands have probably played more 50-over cricket, albeit against what we would regard as lesser opposition. But they have a plan and they know what their bowlers are going to do and when they're going to bowl. They know what their batters can do. And I think actually it shouldn't be anything like as much of a surprise to us as it is. And the notion that South Africa, on the basis of beating a really dreadfully performing Australia that day, I don't think Australia were a dreadful team, but they performed appallingly badly that day. And a Sri Lankan side who are absolute dog shit with the ball. They just are, I'm afraid. And they also bowled first on a flat deck, which is something, incidentally, that England did, which was equally stupid at Delhi, because it was a beautiful pitch to bat on for the first half of the day, and that they smashed around for 400. South Africa still conceded 320 against a pretty shit Sri Lankan side. So the idea that just after a couple of games, South Africa really good, is just the nonsense of recency. It's the idiocy of punditry, and it's the failure to understand that 50-over cricket is a game that none of the people who are watching it genuinely understand. And that's why we should all be watching on with awe and wonder as every moment of this tournament progresses and learn rather than think that we know. You know, it's really hard to do for cricket fans. We've always got to be right, haven't we? But how about we just fucking watch it for a moment? Sorry, I'm probably not allowed to say that.
Well, I mean, I take the point. I think you are allowed to say that word. There's no greater authority than me in this conversation, and so I permit it. I think with the same point you make there about recency, I'd throw back at you slightly. I think it's very easy to say after the Netherlands have just beaten South Africa that anything can happen, because anything has just happened. But that doesn't mean that this wasn't a bit of a fringe event, a black swan, if you like. I mean,
they should have beaten Pakistan. They had Pakistan on the ropes when they were bowling out. Their bowling attack is really good. Their bowling attack is way better than anybody gives them credit for. Their batting's a bit pedestrian, but then the greatest tweet of the day, by the way, can I just say, came from my colleague Henry Moran. And in a world in which a tweet that says, "I love being in India, it's great," gets you 15,000 likes and 2 million retweets. He wrote, "That's like mortar off a Dut's bat," as the third six was deposited into the crowd. One of the great puns of all time. No one was watching. No one cared because no one believed. No one thought this game had any importance. And also, Twitter's completely lost any sense whatsoever of frivolity, inventiveness, and interest for anything but the most, I don't know what happens on Twitter that's remotely interesting anymore. None of that. He went, and it drives me mad. It drives me mad because those 3 sixes were utterly vital. They were completely crucial. They changed the course of the game. That took the Netherlands from 5 and over at Dharamsala to nearly 6 and over. And anybody who's watched this World Cup would know that if you can get a side, you can get a chase up to nearly 6 and over at Dharamsala. That is tough. And At the halfway stage, I thought the Netherlands had enough to make a game of it. Now, we all know, looking on paper, they've got those top six and they can smash it everywhere. But they can also get out to people that bowl at 78 miles an hour because they're not used to that, because they're great big alpha males who are whacking Norkia and Rabada and whoever else into the bloody crowd. So when Baz de Leede comes on with a bowl haircut that his mother's made for him with a pair of bacon scissors, then suddenly it's all a little bit more tricky, isn't it? Paul van Makeren, no one rates him. He's actually pretty damn decent. Bowls good pace. The pitch itself had a bit to it. Roelof van der Merwe is a proper bowler. The notion that the Netherlands were massive outsiders in the halfway stage is crazy. It was what they did at the back end of their innings. The last 7-8 overs of that destroyed South Africa. If they kept the Netherlands to 200, they'd probably have walked it in exactly the same way as if England had kept Afghanistan to 220, 230, they'd probably have walked it at Delhi. But they didn't. They asked a question. And once they asked a question, bowlers who do something a little bit different can take wickets, especially against batters who aren't used to facing that kind of bowling. I mean, Baz de Leede is a weird bowler to face, isn't he? If you are Heinrich Klaassen, you're not coming up against Baz de Leede very often. You're setting yourself for, I don't know, Gus Atkinson or Rabada or somebody much, much quicker. So you are asking different questions on what I mean, you watched the game. That was an unusual wicket. And the wicket is the same.
Was, yeah.
And when England played Bangladesh there, Stephen Finn said that England's 350 was way more than they should have got because Bangladesh bowled abysmally for the first 15, 20 overs. And thereafter, England fell away a bit, if you recall, in the last 15 overs. And everyone was disappointed that they didn't get to nearly 400 from the place they were at. His take was that actually the pitches there are quite tricky. And the Netherlands they gave nothing away. I mean, there are hardly any extras there. They bowl wicket to wicket. They ask questions of the pitch and they ask questions of the batters. And, Dutt with his sixes at the back end. Scott Edwards, what a fantastic knock that was. Roelof van der Merwe, they won the game for them. And that's always possible. So, yes, I suppose it's an upset, but I'm not massively surprised. I was at Adelaide last year when they beat them in 20-over cricket, and you're going to say, well, that's 20 overs and it's different. Anyone can win in 20 overs. Well, they won then against South Africa. I ceased to be surprised by the Netherlands winning matches. Sorry.
Okay, well, we'll see how they go through the tournament. I mean, like, I think your point about their batting recovery and what they did in the last 9 overs is a very, very good one. First 34 overs of their innings, 141 for 7. Last 9, 104 for 1. So it did.
It's not bad, is it?
It did flip. It did flip quite significantly. And as you say, their bowling and their bowling plans all round were great. I think final question on this. Well, final 2 questions. You can take them in whichever order you want. Did South Africa choke? And will Netherlands win another match, as you're the Netherlands expert in this World Cup?
I think the Netherlands could beat Sri Lanka. I think the Netherlands could beat anyone. And they've beaten South Africa, so they can beat anyone. But I reckon the Netherlands could definitely beat Sri Lanka. I reckon the Netherlands could definitely beat Afghanistan. And I don't think South Africa choked. I think they did what England did against Afghanistan, which was they chased a target that was a little bit bigger than they thought it was, and they lost key wickets early. And if you lose key wickets early, because there's more runs to be scored, right? Let's just try to remind ourselves about 50-over cricket. It's a bit different from T20 cricket. We're used to just watching T20 cricket. We don't watch 50-over cricket anymore. So when somebody gets 130 in T20 cricket, they're pretty much always going to lose, because it just isn't a lot of runs. It just requires 3 overs of somebody smashing it around a bit. And then, however shit situation you find yourself in, you get 3 overs that go at 12 each. And yeah, it's done, isn't it? Whereas 240 odd in 43 is a bit more runs. 280 is more runs. They're more runs to be scored. And I know people hate to talk about Test cricket these days because it's very recherche and it's just what old people do. But You don't get 280 runs every time when you go out to play in red ball cricket. It's just there's more chance for things to go wrong in 50-over cricket. It's a longer narrative. So, yeah, in answer to your question, I think the Netherlands could win. I'm not sure they will win, but I think they could. I could see them. What we do know is that one of the Afghans and the Netherlands are going to win 2 matches in this World Cup because they've still got to play each other and they've each won a game.
Yeah, that's maths. That was a good display of maths actually all round. And on the South Africa choking thing, we've not really talked about that. There were a couple of suspect moments with the bat. I don't think they really choked. I think that
they just got
Netherlands
out.
played very well. Yeah, I think there was the pitch got harder to bat on, and
because they're quite good, Jack. They're quite good.
Well,
they're not as shit as everyone says. Just because they look a bit, like you don't know who they are, and you never see them in any T20 leagues, doesn't mean they're not good.
No, it's a relative thing, isn't it? I mean, I know they're good at cricket. I'm aware that they're capable cricketers, but relative to the South African team, you would say they're not as good. That's the theory of relativity, I think. I'm actually pretty sure that is the theory. Yeah. So
there's also the theory of sport. There's a theory of sport as well, isn't there? Which is that they're all really quite good at it. So it only takes one side to be like all playing a bit better than the other side, and they might win. Because you don't get to be in a World Cup unless you're really quite good at it. And I grant you that, Baz de Leede is a different order of all-rounder from Marco Jansen. I'll give you that. And,
thank you for that concession.
Paul Van Makeren is not quite, Rabada. But is Ngidi always, talked up as? I don't know. Are they that good? Is Kurt
I think they are. I think they're going to come back.
Are they that good? Yeah.
David
Miller's been doing this for years, hasn't he? He's been doing this for years and then getting out. So I don't know. Are they that good?
I've been on the South African bandwagon for a good month now, and I'm not getting off. I think this is a bump in the road. I think this is a minor issue. They'll dismantle England in their next game. And
what is the Afrikaans for hiccup?
No idea. Actually, I don't. My Afrikaans isn't as good as it used to be. I'm afraid. There is one other game that we wanted to touch on briefly. Sri Lanka v Australia. This probably wasn't as good. It briefly threatened to be, as Sri Lanka went gangbusters on their way to 150 for 1. Unfortunately, they were 209 all out, and Australia, they did walk it. 215 for 5 in the end, winning with a good 15 overs to spare. Here's a question, and I think it was very funny the first week of the World Cup when Australia were bottom of the table. Now that they've won a game, and now that England and South Africa have lost, and Pakistan have lost, the path is opening up again for Australia to come steaming through the middle here and comfortably make it to the semi-finals, isn't it? I'm not, looking at the tea leaves and reading that wrong.
No, it could happen. Couldn't it? I mean, if Zampa stops bowling badly and Glenn Maxwell gets on a roll and, Warner finds his, I don't know. Jeff Lemon's been just arrived with us here in Chennai and he's watched them and he thinks that they're just not playing very well at all. And they've picked largely their test team, and their test team are a bit knackered because they've had quite a year. And I can see that. And they seem to have something that lacks a method. I'm not scared particularly of Australia. I don't think any other side should be scared of them. And I think they only just beat Sri Lanka. I mean, they let Sri Lanka get off to a flyer. And Sri Lanka are a poor team. I mean, we've watched them up close and personal a couple of times. And they've essentially got a couple of batters who can really hurt you and almost no bowlers. I think they're a worse team than the Netherlands and a worse team than Afghanistan myself. And it's not entirely their own fault. They're missing a few players through injury. And they're relying on a couple of under-19 players in Welalage and Patirana. And they've now dropped Patirana to give them a point of difference. So for Australia to kind of limp over the line, I know they got there with that 10 overs to spare, but 6 wickets down was pretty ugly. And had Sri Lanka shown any kind of composure there and got to sort of 270, 280, then I think Australia would have struggled. So, yeah. I think there's a lot of teams that aren't very good. That's basically it. There's a lot of teams that aren't very good, and they'll get better because they'll suddenly play 9 games, and after they've played 9 games, they'll know what they're doing.
So the end of the tournament's going to be really high quality, but for now,
Yeah.
we can forget about it. Is that the message that we're hearing from you, having seen it live?
Get the wine out of the fridge, lad. Yeah, I'm saying that they're all learning on their feet. I'm just saying they're learning on their feet, and it'll get better. And India look like the team that knows what it is that they're doing. Are you off as well? What?
Right, it's Daniel.
It's
not really breaking the fourth wall. Just talks to other people in the room. 2 more games coming up. Our next show will be on Thursday. I think that'll be Ross and I. A reminder, if you're watching on YouTube or listening wherever you are, to hit like and subscribe. It keeps us going. We've had a few more reviews in, and Ross will be reading them out on our next episode. So do tune in on Thursday. The next game's coming up. We've got New Zealand v Afghanistan tomorrow. New Zealand obviously unbeaten after their first 3 matches of the tournament. Afghanistan claiming a heroic victory over England. Dan, you were there at the game, the Afghanistan game. Are Afghanistan for real? Are we going to see them, make a late charge for a qualification spot, or will we see them upset a couple of other teams, or do you expect New Zealand to put them away, probably by chasing 2 wickets down?
Don't know actually. Don't know about Afghanistan because they got some interesting talent in there. I mean, Gurbat's batted absolutely superbly, and they've got other players that didn't actually fire that day. Ramat Shah really rate as well. I think they've got quite a decent top order, and I'm not sure that New Zealand's bowling attack necessarily has got a lot of wicket takers in them. I don't think that's not really their way. They go quite defensive quite early, New Zealand, but they do have a sensible, efficient batting lineup. So they might play against Afghanistan's mystery bowlers a little bit better than England did. That'll be the key to their success. I think it'll be. I genuinely don't know. I am intrigued by it. Afghanistan are on a roll. I think they're a good enough side to win another game. You fancy New Zealand will probably win. It would make more sense for them to win because they look like they know what they're doing. But Mujib is a bloody good bowler. That's going to depend on the pitch. I don't know what the pitch is going to be like at Chennai. It tends to sort of do a little bit. Mujib isn't a spinner, but Rashid Khan is. I'm really impressed with Faruqi. Loved him. Got some serious movement. Big thing in Chennai is going to be dew. And because we've been here and it is humid as fuck. I mean, it is damp and strange and odd. So I would probably be wanting to bat first here. I think bowling here and the evenings here, the sultry, that's going to be a significant factor, I would imagine. So if you wanted to get what you might term as another upset, but I'm not sure it is anymore, I would be going Afghanistan. They, but get their bowling out of the way and bat in the second innings, which is not the way they beat England, but I think at Chennai it might be the way to go.
Fair enough. And then final game and final point on this podcast: India v Bangladesh. That's a formality for India, right? Bangladesh have looked pretty poor. Yeah,
I mean, look, if Bangladesh beat India, then my whole point that no one knows what it is that's going on will be proven right. I'm probably wrong about that, but I cannot see anything other than a massive India win. I can't see anything other than massive India wins whenever India play until the knockout stages. And at the knockout stages, they'll then be up against sides that have played and played and played and will have developed a method. And then you might get an actual matchup. But I can't see India being tested in the group stages really at all. They might drop a game, but it's not going to be against Bangladesh. I mean, really. Bangladesh are one of the great conundra of modern cricket. I don't know why they haven't got any better. And I don't know why I've been watching Shakib Al Hassan since they started. I'm amazed Tamim Iqbal isn't there. I'm amazed actually, what's his name? Javid Omar isn't opening the batting. It's basically the same side that I've been watching forever and they never seem to get any better.
Mortizer. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's it's a dreadful shame. And I don't quite understand it because I don't know enough about the machinations of Bangladesh internal cricket. But they, if they beat India, then the World Cup really will have taken an extraordinary and bizarre turn.
It would be. I would be quite. I mean, there's sort of talk. I don't know how serious it is. Talk. This might be the last ever ODI World Cup, and it would be kind of fitting if we went out with England being terrible, South Africa choking, and India making it to a semi-final that they inevitably lose to the underdog. With Australia, I suppose, coming through to win it out of nowhere. That would be a good way, a good way to sign off. I think that probably wraps up the show. What a cheerful note!
I'll give you one last thought on that though.
Cool.
So I sat in the bus. You want a little bit of colour? So I sat in the team bus on our way back from the game when England lost to Afghanistan. Stephen Finn, he's a very taciturn man. He goes, we were talking about, is this going to be the last World Cup? He says, it'll be the last 50 over World Cup. They'll play 40 overs next time. 40.
Well, it's not inconceivable.
I think 50 overs. I think 50 overs. I think after just watching 20 over cricket for so long, 50 overs is so long for people. It just is. It hurts. It just hurts.
Well, I mean, unless they find a way to speed it up. Yeah, unless they find a way to speed it up.
Sri Lanka can't be allowed to play then. Sri Lanka can't be allowed to play. 45 fucking minutes late they were. Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel. Anything that you want to plug or anything before you head off?
Yeah, to plug. Yeah, I'd like to plug Zero Ducks Given, of course, which is a non-award-winning podcast in which much of the time I have to coerce Vinny into listening to the questions that have been asked to him before he falls asleep. Obviously, good pace for radio on the BBC as well as the No Balls podcast. And hang on a minute, I don't have to do that anymore, do I? Check the BBC Sport website and app for all the in-play clips and highlights because they're always available. And I suppose I just want to plug me really because of everything that I've done for cricket, and I don't feel that I've been properly rewarded for it. So I'd like to thank me for everything that I've done. And
About time.
Me more. Commentary of every ball of every game of the World Cup. I've just been reminded, and highlights on the BBC Sport website and app, and me, and me, yeah, and ABC Sport. Oh, sorry, ABC Sport Digital and the ABC Sport app. There's an awful lot I've got to plug, but most of all, I'd like to plug me.
Well,
when I say that, I don't want anyone really following me particularly. I mean, I just want to make a reasonable living out of it. That's all I actually want, Jack. Is it too much to ask? Maybe it is.
You've made a pitch. Maybe there's someone out there that's going to hear it. They can find you on Twitter or well, apparently you don't like that. I don't know, they send you an email or something like that. Contact you through your agent.
I don't dislike Twitter, but I've still got Twitter, by the way. Everyone else has got X, but I've made sure that I update every single other app manually on my phone except that one. So I've still got Twitter.
Perfect. I think that's a good way to leave things. Thanks, Dan. Hopefully we'll catch up with you later in the tournament and enjoy your evening. Goodbye.
I love you all and everything you do, Jack. Mwah.